Done. And we're recording. Amazing.
Oh, I'm seeing loads of friendly faces in the group.
Oh, amazing.
Nice.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. We'll give it a few more minutes. I'm seeing the attendees numbers creep up. But in the meantime, please jump in with your name, where you're tuning in from. I always love to kind of hear where people are from. I'm sadly still stuck in London. And I'm super jealous when people jump in and they're like, I'm from Spain, or like just more exotic places where I feel like they've just got access to a beach right now. Welcome, Matt from London. We've got Kerry from London as well. Perfect. Oh, see, Spain. I knew it. There's always one.
Yeah. There's Eddie. Eddie, I was chatting to you this morning. How are you?
Amazing.
So we've got Portugal as well. Singapore.
Nice. Oh, Portugal.
Nice.
But it's supposed to be really lovely this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that. I hear it's like 24 all weekend.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Audrey, you and I are off on Monday, Tuesday as well, so making a proper holiday of it.
Yes.
I'm so excited. I got an inflatable pool in my back garden. I'm ready.
It needs to be done.
Nice.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're nearly 5 minutes past. I don't want to waste too much time. And some of those attendees kind of creeping up, but
you just give me a shout.
Yeah. Get started. I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm John. I'm the Partnerships Manager at General Assembly, which means I just reach out to incredible brands and speakers to help me deliver these community events. Now, we normally host these in our space 4 evenings a week, and then just in light of our current situation, doing anything and everything we can do to get it still all up and running online. So do head over to our website. Everything is still listed there. Yes, that's pretty much it from that end. We're pretty much a tech education company, if you don't know who we are, offering high demand skills in tech. This is through full-time and part-time courses, classes and workshops, and in these free events as well, where our mission is just to empower those to pursue a career they love and help them with the career transition into skills such as UX design, data science, and software engineering. We are also recording this event, and we will be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and anything White Bear Studios would like to add as well. I'm going to stop talking. My mouth is getting dry. It's happening. I'm going to pass you over to Kelly to talk more about White Bear Studios and kind of just diving into the content. So take it away.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks, John. So I'm Kelly McKenzie, the founder and the creative director of White Bear Studios. And we're a brand and design agency who create future unicorns. So I'm assuming that's why you're all here today. We work with funded startups and scale-ups to help them disrupt their market and deliver serious results. If you're looking for investment, you're in the right place for this talk, because every brand that we have created has secured their investment. So without further ado, I shall share my screen and let's start getting into the content. While I'm setting that up, Audrey, did you want to share anything about our Slack community?
Yes, please. I'm going to put some links in the chat for you guys to look through. We have a Future Unicorn Slack community right now, and we would love for you to join if you end up really liking the talk. It's an area for brands and brand experts, founders, CEOs, marketing managers, whoever, to just join and talk about their challenges that they're currently facing, because I know we really are all facing quite a lot right now. And to also just spitball ideas and kind of have some fun, creative conversations. So I put the link over in the chat. You're welcome to join.
Great. So now we are up and running with our slide deck. I hope everybody can see the slides now and see me flicking through the slides. Cool. So I wanted to start off by telling you all a little story. Has anybody heard of the white bear phenomenon or of Daniel Wegner? No? Great. Okay, I have a story to tell. So Daniel Wegner is an American psychologist, and he studied thought suppression. And a theory that he had was that if you were asked to think about something, you couldn't help but think about that one thing. And the example that he always used was a white bear. So he said, whatever you do, do not think about a white bear. And he found that his pupils couldn't go more than 20 seconds without thinking about a white bear. So everyone at home, I'd like you to take 20 seconds to think about anything. Just do not think about a white bear. Think about anything else, maybe what you're doing for the bank holiday, staying at home, or anything else. I think that's long enough. I think you'll find that it's very hard to put a thought out of your head. And that's what Daniel Wegner found with his white bear theory. So the white bear phenomenon is a demonstration of the difficulty people have in suppressing a thought. Why am I telling you this? Well, firstly, it's a shameless plug. We're called White Bear. Secondly, because it's how you create a compelling brand by making sure an idea sticks in your mind, like that white bear. And thirdly, it's a great story. And telling a great story is crucial in achieving investment and achieving your goals. I'm going to use the word investment throughout here. What I mean is we all need investment, whether it is funding, whether it is partnerships, whether it is getting stocked, getting retailers, and scaling up. They're all different forms of investment. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to use that term throughout. So the world of investment is complex. We're going to use human knowledge or human language throughout this talk because, spoiler alert, that's actually what investors look for. Our brains are wired to understand and retain stories, not data. Think back to caveman times when stories were your currency. Research shows that our brains are not hardwired to retain facts for very long. Our brains are wired to understand emotion. So that is crucial when developing your brand story. So what is a brand story? Let's start with that. So the infographic you can see in front of you is the journey that a traditional business will go on, right from inception through to traction through to getting scale. And it demonstrates a typical journey that your brand will go on also. Your brand story, as you can see, it starts at inception and carries right through as you scale. It needs to underpin everything that you do. It's the current that needs to flow through every business and nearly every decision you make, and it needs to be consistent. Whether you're a startup or a growing business, how you tell your brand story will make or break your pitch. As you can see there, the brand story comes way before even the branding. So having that clear and concise is crucial. So what do I mean when I say a brand story? What is a brand story? It's made up of a number of components. I'll go to the next slide. It's made up of your purpose, your mission, your vision, your values, and how you communicate that through your tone of voice. And that all comes together to create your value proposition. Now, what are all these different elements? I'm going to talk about them in a little bit more detail as we go through. But clearly defining your brand story will help you to effectively communicate your pitch. These 5 elements will help form the basis for the story you tell your investor. Whether you tell your investor a story with disruption and an attention-grabbing hook, or you decide to have more of a traditional story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You need to know your core narrative and communicate it with absolute clarity. So we're going to help you establish that narrative today. You can't sell anything if you can't tell anything, which is so true. We're going to start with some exercises to help you distill down your brand story. Your brand story will not only help you to be more impactful, but it forms the foundation for your whole business's journey, from your logo right through to how you communicate on social media. This always is a mouthful. Functional MRI neuroimagery shows that when evaluating brands, consumers primarily use emotions. So again, think back to that caveman, think back to coming up with that emotive, engaging story. I've spoken to many VCs and many investors, and one particularly stood out to me where he said, I want people to unlearn what they're traditionally told to say in a pitch and actually just speak from the heart. That's what really gets them. People believe that they share values with the company, they'll stay loyal to that company. So what I want to first start off with is your brand's values. There's a good chance that your investor will want to know what your values are. So we want to make sure that you don't get caught out. Why do they ask this? Well, because they want to know what it's like to work with you. And your values are a reflection of what you are like to work with. Not only will they care about your values, but they'll want to make sure they align with their own. Your investor will have spent their career, and this is specifically related to investment, they'll spend their career collecting trusted business partners, and they're going to want to introduce you to them so that you can gain their knowledge. In order to help you, they will offer these introductions, and they want to make sure that you make them look good. So they won't want to risk taking a chance on a wild card that doesn't have shared values. We're going to get to the party in a minute, but just before that, imagine that you're in an elevator, although not many of us are getting into elevators these days, but let's just go with this analogy. And you're on the way up to the pitch, and an investor hops in the elevator with you, and he asks you on the spot, or she, what are your core values? You don't want to be caught out. So do your research. For example, if your business has innovation or social impact at the core, don't waste your time going to investors who don't have this as a priority. If you're a more artisan business, don't go for investors who are only interested in hyper-growth businesses. Remember, your values need to stand the test of time and be authentic to you. So now it is party time. So we're going to do this exercise, which will help you distill down your own brand values, and it's the best place to start when creating your brand story. Believe it or not, many businesses don't actually have values, or the values that they have aren't relevant to their business and they sit there gathering dust. Many companies would use integrity or empathy, quality or premium as some of their brand values. To be honest, those values are too generic. I've heard them a million times before, and they should be a given, not a differentiator. So values are differentiators. So often we get interaction with this, so feel free to chip in. This exercise I would recommend every one of you doing. Your brand, so not you, I know it can be very difficult when you are a founder to separate yourself from your brand, but not you, your brand is hosting a party. Now at this party, they are inviting all of their target audience, from their customers, their clients, their investors, their partners, partnerships that they want, potential stockists, retailers, all their ideal people are coming to this party. So what I get the businesses that we work with to do is describe that party, because that party will give a clear indication of the personality and the feel of the brand. To start off, we always say, how does the brand approach people at this party? Is it an open door, a bit of a free-for-all? Sorry if it's a bit noisy. I can hear my 2-year-old in the background. How do they approach people? Is it warm hugs? Is it just an open door, free-for-all? And that gives an indication as to how formal or how attentive a business might be. What kind of drink is it in their hand at this party? Is it a craft beer, or is it a martini? Again, it's the why that I'm interested in here. It's not necessarily the drink, but it's why it's that drink. And that drink should give you a list of descriptors to describe your brand again. How would their friends describe them? All these target audience that have shown up at this party that are having a great time, how would they describe their host? Is their host a socialite? Are they into deep, meaningful conversations? Are they connectors? How are they being described? Again, gives you an indication as to how your business will interact with people and engage with people. What do they look like? I mean, often we start there. Do you feel like your brand is male? Is it female? Is it more fluid? What kind of feel do you get of this personified version of your brand? It's a really fun exercise to do. So what you will gather is a whole page of all of these different types of descriptor words, from fun-loving, energetic, to thoughtful, and maybe it's a dinner party and it's a bit more formal. You'll gather this whole list, and then we go to, oh, I haven't got the next slide in there, but the next slide is, this host is actually, they've gotten a bit drunk. They've either had a few too many of those martinis, martinis, or perhaps they're on the green tea and they're wired off the caffeine, one or other. Think about what gets amplified when they've had a few drinks. Do they become louder? Do they become more fun? Do they wear their heart on their sleeve? Again, think of all of these descriptors. What we do when we have this whole list of descriptor words is we then do this with the brand's team. It's a bit more difficult if you are a sole founder and you don't have employees yet. If so, I would recommend getting some stakeholders involved or anyone whose opinion you really value. Or if you are a business with a number of employees, it's a really good exercise to do. You have all of these words, and then what you must do is go through each word, and without any judgment, if the word does not resonate with you on the team, you raise your hand and we will get rid of that word off the list. And that could be anybody. So we've done this exercise before a number of years ago, and something that was really important to me was say yes and then find out how. That was something that really drives me as a business owner. However, what I found was actually that freaks the designers out, because then the designers are like, oh, you say yes and we have to find out how. And that's not something that is core to them in White Bear. So that wasn't a true core value. But what we did find was hunger, that joy of discovery, was something that was true to each of us. We just implemented it in different ways. So what you need to do then is narrow it down to 4 core values that resonate with you. Another question I ask, which works really well, is at this party, what music is being played? The music that's being played will inform the tempo of the party and the feel for the party. A lot of the brands we work with actually make Spotify playlists for their brands, and they listen to it when they really want to get into the mood of their brand. If you're classical music and it's more melodic and calm versus hip hop music, they are very, very different feels and inform everything from how you write your copy to the type of imagery that you choose. So starting with brand values is key, and I hope I've given you some tips there on how to start thinking about those. The other elements that come into a brand is your purpose, your vision, your mission, and they come together to inform your value proposition. What I always say is that 90% of what goes on in a business happens behind closed doors. It's the 10% that the outside world actually see. A brand story works much in the same way. Your purpose, your vision, and your mission make up 90% of your brand story. And it's that value proposition, that cherry on top, the tip of the iceberg, that is what is really pumped out there in all of your communications and all of your advertising. It's that hook that gets people interested and clearly defines your brand story and who you are as a business. 70% of all employees are unknowingly misaligned with their company's strategic direction. Can you imagine how impactful it would be if 100% of employees were aligned with the company's strategic direction? And that is just clear that the company is muddled themselves in terms of what their clear strategic direction is, and that they're not communicating. Let's start with your purpose. It's always a great place to start. Why do you do what you do? That is what your purpose is. It is your why. Investors want to work with purpose-led brands. It is essential that you can tell them why you exist and why you are needed in no more than a sentence. It's the foundation of that iceberg chart that I just talked about. We always go back to this rule with investors specifically. There's a 110-1 rule where investors will see 100 businesses that do the same thing as you. They'll only invest in 10 of them, and only one of them will be a success. So you need to make sure to ensure that you are in that 10, that you have absolute clarity and precision in how you communicate your brand and your business, and that you clearly know what makes you different to separate yourself from that other 90. After purpose, after you know why you exist, you then need to examine your vision, the reason that you get out of bed in the morning. The vision needs to be really aspirational and show your investors what you see your future being. This should be in human terms and concise. Vision shows your investors that you're committed that you have direction, and that you have a clear focus. But be suitably ambiguous with that vision. We often find people can get buried in being the biggest in the world or having a really high monetary value. Your vision needs to stand the test of time. Your service or your product may pivot. I mean, I think that's more relevant now than in any other time. People are pivoting their businesses left, right, and center. But what needs to stay clear is that vision for what they want to achieve. So don't make it monetary, and also don't make it achievable within 10 years. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but they really underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So be really ambitious. I often say Apple, with their proposition being think different, if they were to say they were going into space, or if they were to even start a range of kitchen appliances, people would go, all right, yeah, that makes sense. They're thinking differently. They're suitably ambiguous. Their vision isn't directly related to a service or to a product. So I would say to aim for the stars. Now, next up, we have mission. Your mission is, how are you going to do it? I often say that your purpose, think of your brand story like a journey. Your purpose is why you set off on that journey, why you start walking. Your vision is where you ultimately want to get to, that end dream destination. And your mission is how you're going to get there. So how do you get from A to B? Often that can change as businesses grow, but your mission is how you are going to do it. So those three things, four things, your purpose, your vision, your mission, and your values come together to form your value proposition. So your value proposition is a promise of a promise to be delivered, communicated, and acknowledged. It should be no more than a sentence. 3 words. If you can get it in 2 words, even better. As short and sweet as possible. Some examples to get you thinking. I always think Hinge is a great example. Their value proposition being designed to be deleted. It clearly tells you their values, their purpose, and their mission. So it's really, really clear and really concise. Some other examples I have in here are brands that we worked with recently. Caboodle. Caboodle came to us with a challenge in that their differentiator was that they cared for your belongings when they were being stored. They had super safe security systems. It was all QR code organized, and it was super high tech. Far, far superior to a big yellow or yellow space, or love space and big yellow, because they really cared. It wasn't just about things. So with their value proposition, we clearly wanted to communicate that. Belongings, not boxes. We're not just here to store your stuff and stack boxes. We're here to care about your belongings. So really simple and really, really succinct. Next up, another value proposition we have in here is Mary4. Mary4 were a brand that came to us with an amazing product, a mattress that helped prevent children from developing asthma or other types of allergies. When we talked to them, they were actually called Kit for Kids at the time, which firstly, when you're targeting a newborn audience, kids signifies toddlers, kit signifies kind of cheap stuff. So the name wasn't working for them. And what they did, and what was their differentiator, was that mattress really protected you. And that was what we wanted them to own in their sector. So firstly, we renamed them so they sounded very British and very premium. And secondly, the value proposition was protecting your future dreamers. So this idea that when you're not there, when you're not there to look after your newborn, they are being protected. And future dreamers is aspirational, and you want to give your child the best in life. So there's 2 examples of value propositions. So I'm just seeing a question come in here. I will read that now in 1 minute. So how you communicate that from your purpose, your vision, your mission, your values, and then having your value proposition. You can't just have all those elements and say them all differently. You need to say them in a really consistent tone of voice. that is the same throughout everything that you do. So there's clarity and there's personality, a clear personality. I often give an example. I love this ad, Spotify's 2019 campaign. They were just geniuses in terms of targeting 2 target audiences at the same time. Plus, Spotify will want to feel relevant, current, topical, and this 1983 UB40 red wine, 2019 you actually B40, still drinking that red wine. It's just so clever and so on point in terms of Spotify's tone of voice. Oh, I will come back to that. I mean, also another example I give is if I was to say receive a letter from the NHS. I won't be receiving one anytime soon, but if I was to, saying you are due your regular smear test update, and that was in the tone of voice of a Paddy Power ad, I don't think I would be too happy about that. So they're two they may be saying, maybe they're saying the same thing, but they're saying them both very, very differently. And how you say and communicate your story is just as important as what you are saying. The way we plot tone of voice is on the 4 pillars of tone of voice. So from funny to serious, from formal to casual, from respectful to irreverent, and from enthusiastic to matter of fact. Does anyone want to chip in and let me know if they feel their brand is more serious or more funny? Or does anyone have a really clear tone of voice that they'd like to share? Or an example of where they think they've seen an amazing tone of voice? I think everyone's thinking. Wendy's, oh, they're all flying in. Wendy's Burgers in the US on Twitter is famously funny. I must check that out. How do you suggest tone of voice to adjust to different audiences? That's really interesting, and that's something that we do often come up against, because brands invariably have different target audiences. I mean, some being B2B and B2C, or some being different types of demographics, or and you do need to tailor it, absolutely. But I don't think you should be starkly different in how you talk to people, because that's not authentic. You need to work out what's authentic to your own brand and your own brand's tone of voice. And then you can slightly tweak it. You might go up and down the spectrum a little bit. So say you say, oh, we're a really funny brand. And then maybe in certain instances, maybe say with your response to COVID-19 online, you can't really go in there puns galore and be disrespectful. You need to be mindful and you need to be thoughtful. So you pare that back a little bit, but you still stay on the more light-hearted side of things. If you were to drastically drop down to super serious, that wouldn't align with your brand, and that would sound like somebody else's brand. So that's why we have a spectrum here, so that you can move up and down, but still trying to stay consistent to who you are. So you wouldn't jump from one side to the other. We often say a good example is, how would you write an error message on your website? So you like that error 404 message. If you're a bit more playful, it'd be like, oops, what happened here? If you're more formal, like utmost apologies, we're doing our very best to get this working again ASAP. So thinking about your messaging and how you can give it a personality and be playful with it. I always ask, how long do investors spend reading pitch decks? But in this instance, I actually could have asked this before I put it up on the screen. Anyway, 3 minutes, 44 seconds is how long an investor spends reading a pitch deck. You need to be able to say everything that you can really simply, really clearly. Think more than 7 or 8 simple, concise slides in the right tone of voice. So now we have our brand story, we have our values, our purpose, our mission, our vision. They come together to make our value proposition, and we really clearly know how to communicate that in the right tone of voice. We then move on to need to know how to execute that. How do we tell everybody visually who we are and what we stand for? And that comes into the executions section. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. Development of a strong brand identity is critical to demonstrating that the founders are committed to delivering the proposition. So that's from a VC who we have worked with. So absolutely, I mean, we've heard countless times that showing really core branding strength and branding assets demonstrates firstly that you have skin in the game yourself, that you're invested, that you're really taking it seriously. And secondly, it allows the investors see what they can sell. So they can see the opportunity, they can see that you've created the vision for either a lifestyle brand or whatever it might be. You've solved a problem, you've visually shown them how that's going to communicate to your target audience. So before I get into talking about the exact technical bits, I wanted to share Eden with you. Eden were a brand that came to us from a startup, and they were a vegetarian and vegan burger range. And they were actually being set up by butchers. So their differentiator was that they knew what a really great tasting burger tasted like. They knew how to get the right texture, how to get the juiciness. And that was something all their competitors didn't know how to do. So your likes of Gosh or Linda McCartney, they all taste like cardboard. They all just are a bit holier than thou, talking about, oh, we're vegetarian. Whereas Eden are like, we're vegetarian and vegan, but we taste amazing. So going back to the story of Eden and temptation, we came up with a value proposition for them called tantalizingly tasty, because we saw that they could own taste in their sector because nobody else was doing that. In terms of brand execution and assets, we always try to own a color. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Own a typeface. We don't just use a typeface that anybody could use, because then you can be copied and it's not ownable to you. Handcrafted type is so important, and one that has ownability. Like, for example, Eden here that has the leaf in the D. It's just so important. In terms of tone of voice, being this temptation and tantalizingly tasty, you can see how that even comes into play with their flavor names. Succulently sweet, seductively spicy, and flavorfully flirty. Another USP of theirs is that the burgers are steamed rather than fried, which locks in more goodness. But we call that let's get steamy, again, to be a bit more playful and a bit more cheeky. For any of you out there who have food products and need packaging, we always follow the 12-foot, 6-foot, 1-foot rule. 12-foot back, you see strong brand impact, brand standout. 6-foot, you see the SKUs and the flavors, and 1-foot, you see the benefits. So that's a really good way of judging the hierarchy on your pack to make sure that you have optimum shelf shout. Next up is talking about the iconography on the side, again, so that every single touch point feels crafted and branded. Now I'm going to get into the details. So in order to create a truly iconic brand, you need to do 3 things. Firstly, be ownable. So have a set of ownable assets. What do I mean when I say ownable assets? Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. But ownable is think back to why you're different. Memorable. You need to be able to stand out from the crowd. You need to disrupt. You need to tell a compelling story. You need to have that stickiness white bear moment. And lastly, scalable. You need to be future-proof for growth. You don't want to be changing your brand and your communications every few years, every time you come out with a new product or a new service. You want it to be scalable and robust for growth. So these are the 3 things that you need to consider when creating a brand identity. First up, let's talk about ownable. Ownable means that you have ownable assets. You have a unique logo that's handcrafted. You own a color in your sector. It's very difficult to own a color in any sector, but to own one in your own sector is absolutely doable. So look at your competitors and see what they're doing and be different. Bespoke topography, so that you can create pull branding and intrigue rather than push branding. You don't want to have to slap your logo on everything in order to create brand awareness, whereas topography and color create a brand feel and a brand personality without having to put your logo on everything. And then a consistent brand language, so how you speak and your tone of voice needs to be consistent. owning a color first up. So these color palettes are from social media apps. Can anyone tell me which apps they are from? This just shows the power of owning a color in your sector. Saying to you that it's social media, I think, gives the answer. Yeah, we have them right there. Instagram, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Oh, the person that we're missing the red one. Does anyone know the red one? Yeah, someone said YouTube. You're right. It's interesting. I always put that one in there as a bit of a wild card, because you do get people saying Netflix, or people saying Pinterest, or people saying Meetup. So that clearly shows how YouTube aren't owning a color in their sector, but how the others are. So everyone instantly recognizes the Twitter, the Instagram, and the Facebook, and you haven't even seen the brand. You just know the sector because you're looking in that area, and you instantly recognize the color. Next up, we have bespoke topography. I'm going to have a look at the questions while I ask. Does anybody recognize these brands? We've got Disney, we've got Lego, and we've got Coke. Yes, absolutely. So this is ownable, distinctive topography. Straight away, you recognize it as the brand without it even having the brand name in there. That just shows the power of ownable type. Next up, we have imagery. Can anyone tell me these two brands, what they are? Yeah, Red Bull's come up with millions. Red Bull, someone said Ralph Lauren, but it's actually not right. Tommy Hilfiger, yeah. They're flying in there. Yeah, I mean, this actually, we work at Red Bull, and the illustrator who created the initial ad campaigns back in the 80s for Red Bull is still creating them every year from his little house in Austria up in a mountain. And it's such an iconic illustration style that you know it's Red Bull without seeing that can. So these are all things that you can own. And can you imagine the power of bringing an illustration style, topography style, color, logo style, all of those assets that are unique to you together, how instantly recognizable you are and impactful. I think last up we have tone of voice. Can anyone tell me these brands? Nike, KFC, Apple, Maybelline. Yeah, nailed it again. Yeah, you just know them straight away. There's no logo in there. There's no other communications, no visuals, but you know their value propositions because they're really clear and really to the point. Brewdog, I always put in here, are a great example of having ownable assets. They are the highest growing food and drink brand in the UK for the last 8 years. And what they did differently was they came in and disrupted the market. Firstly, with their craft beer, they created a style for the whole craft beer movement. But also we're used to seeing crafted logos like a Heineken or a Carlsberg with these highly embellished logos. And they came in and used simple letterpress letters, which disrupted the market. Their tone of voice, like Elvis Juice and Punk IPA and the Dead Pony Club, another one. Again, really playful tone of voice in a sector that actually was quite serious until craft beer came along. So they totally disrupted their aisle and had shelf shout. Since starting, Brewdog have raised more than £73 million investment. So that's ownability. Second up is memorability. So having a clear story will help you to be memorable and remember that will stick in your customers' minds. And remember that memorable a lot. Remember that they relate to emotion and story, not data. And being memorable will build your customer loyalty and make it easier for you to track your brand valuation. Being memorable is crucial for repeat business. Universally recognized symbols. I mean, oh God, here's the last test, I think. Can anyone tell me these products? I think this just is testament to the strength of product design. Yeah, Marmite, Pringles, Toilet Duck, ketchup. Someone says Pond's. That's not actually Pond's. Hellman's, nope. Tabasco, yeah, we got that one. Marmite, yeah. Yeah, I think we've got all of them. I think we're missing, no one said Orangina. Orangina there, it's just coming through there. So yeah, that just shows the power of even just your format. So we always talk a lot about Pip and Nut, and how Pip and Nut were amazing in terms of how they changed the format of peanut butter, because they saw a need in people wanting peanut butter on the go in a sachet. So that they could squeeze it out of a sachet. You're not going to run around with the tub of peanut butter in your bum bag. So they saw the answer to a problem, and also changed their format, which allows them to stand out and have memorability. Last up, we have scalable. So taking the time to think about your brand story will help you to scale. Remember being suitably ambiguous. You need to future-proof your brand so you don't limit yourself by a name or an identity that confines you to just one thing and that you outgrow. You need a name that allows you to be flexible and allows you to grow. An example is a barbecue brand that we branded recently called Prairie Fire Barbecue. And when we did our strategy workshop with them and really dug into their ultimate vision and goals, it was to be more than a barbecue brand. They wanted to bring ranges of American great tasting food. They also, someone mentioned they wanted to open a theme park with all this amazing food. So barbecue was too limiting. So we dropped barbecue and made them just Prairie Fire, which tells their true story about being from Kansas City. And that's something that will never change. So that allows them to scale. So that's what we say as well when thinking about a name. Think about, are you going to be launching in different countries? How is it pronounced in different countries? There's lots of different things to think about. I mean, MasterCard, one recently, who they're a very descriptive brand name, and they actually changed from the capital M and capital C in MasterCard to a lowercase one, because originally the name came from that piece of plastic and the actual card. Whereas now with fintech, nobody really uses cards that much. So their name was becoming a little bit irrelevant. So they made it a lowercase m and a no lowercase c to try and move it away from being a noun and a thing and to being more of a verb. So to recap on the 3 things to consider when looking at your branding and creating really disruptive branding is to be ownable, to be memorable, and to be scalable. And those assets that you need are a unique color, or owning a color, a unique logo, bespoke typography, and a really consistent brand language through everything that you do. So I always say this wrong, but strong brands equal a higher profit and a lower risk. A higher profit because you'll be able to attract more customers. And a strong brand will allow you to charge a premium. At a lower risk because you'll have built brand loyalty and created that credibility. Case in point, Starbucks being able to charge £2.75 for a coffee over a white label brand. And a higher profit and a lower risk equals a kerching higher brand valuation, which is what we all want. So that's the end of my talk. I hope you all found it really interesting. I think we have some time left now for some questions. So let me just have a little scan of questions. I think Audrey mentioned, but for any of you, if you haven't already joined our community, we have a Slack group for future unicorns where we're all sharing challenges and helping each other out. So it'd be great for you guys to join that. And we also are launching a new tool called How to Be a Future Unicorn During a Pandemic. And it's a really detailed toolkit into how to outline your response to COVID-19 and how to respond mindfully and in line with your brand. Should you want this, I think you need to email Audrey. I think she's probably put it in the comments box there. And oh, that's a nice comment. I've done 15 of the General Assembly short courses like this. Yours is by far the best one I've watched. Yes. Thank you for that. Questions, let's see. Do you have a link? Oh God, they're all moving very fast. Questions. Do all these points apply to an app-only company? Absolutely not. For example, I showed packaging companies there, food companies. It applies absolutely across the board. owning color, owning a logo. I mean, it's as important B2C as it is B2B. It's as important in print as it is in tech. And it's as important if someone needs to find you online or if they need to find you in store. How you cut through the noise and be disruptive is just as important no matter where you are finding your target audience. Questions. How branding orientation affects success of startups? Orientation. I'm not sure what your definition of orientation is. Perhaps you could put a little bit of clarity on that and I'll answer that question. How would you recommend understanding how to storytell well? How would you recommend understand? I guess going through the process that I just talked you through, working out firstly what your values are, secondly what your purpose is and why you exist, building on that with what you want to achieve, and then lastly how you're going to achieve that being your mission. So all of those elements help you to storytell. So they're the building blocks that you need in order to tell a good story, and if they're truly authentic to you, then they will be truly unique, and someone else won't be able to tell the same story as you. Any resources to recommend to design your brand logo and brand line? Any resources to recommend? I mean, one thing we're offering actually is a free brainstorm. So we're doing that at the minute to help businesses, especially startups, and to help navigate that world of design and brand for them. So, I mean, in terms of that being a resource, Audrey, I'm sure, is going to share the link so you can click through to book a free brainstorm with us and we can talk you through them, talk you through how to go about it and the challenges that you need to think about. And in advance of that, I can think of a few books if you're a reader as well, or a few podcasts. How do you find future unicorns? Isn't that the question that we all need to ask? I'd love a few future unicorns myself. Yes, well, we work with them, which is great. We choose the brands that we work with because, as I mentioned, every brand that we work with has achieved their investment and their metrics for success. So when working with a new business, we like to understand your business, not just from a brand point of view, but from a business point of view. So we can analyze as to if you're going to be another statistic that we want to shout loud and proud about. Do you mean, are you an investor who's looking to invest in unicorns? If so, I know a lot of businesses I could introduce you to. We work on a lot of accelerator programs like Bethnal Green Ventures and Positive Planet. That have a lot of amazing businesses there that I could see all being future unicorns. Let's see, any other questions? How will you break into a category where there are established brands already? That is a great question, and that's one that we love. We call that the David and Goliath, where we say, well, you are the David, you're the challenger, and you're up against these massive Goliaths. You can't outspend them as well, so you have to outsmart them. You have to be nimble, and you have to be reactive and quick. So you can outsmart them on in terms of your brand story and being really disruptive on shelf or your social media. It's about being different. These large corporations and large businesses are actually quite slow to respond. They're quite corporate heavy. They have a lot of stakeholders. They're slow to make decisions. So you actually have the benefit of being smaller and nimble to respond quickly. Again, with the current crisis that is going on, being able to respond quickly is so important. And I think that's a benefit that actual startups and scale-ups have over large corporations at the minute. How are we doing for time? Got a few minutes left. Good questions. You'd like to get in touch with investors yourself, says Will. Sure, drop Audrey an email, Will. We know a lot of investors, accelerator programs and VCs. Have you got a future unicorn? If so, we'd love to see it, but drop us an email and we can point you in the right direction. Unfortunately, the Slack link didn't come through on the chat. Can you send it again? Audrey, could you please send the Slack group again? The Future Unicorn group. Should we do trial and error on the logo, colors, typography, etc. first, or launch it as it is and push for it? Abigail, again, that's another good question. It totally depends on where you're at. When you're saying launch it as it is, do you mean that you have an MVP or that you have a product? It's quite different in tech versus, say, food packaging. With food packaging, you want retailers to want you on their shelves. You want to stand out, you want people to see you versus your challenger or the bigger brands. So you want to make sure that you stand out. So in which case, getting your brand and your packaging right before you get stocked is crucial. With a tech brands, we work with a lot of tech brands. They usually come to us when they've been through some round of funding already. They have an MVP, they have a few customers, and then they're going for a next round of investment, maybe a further seed round or a Series A. And that's when they can really invest in their branding and creating that personality. Hope that answers that question. This is a long one, so I'm going to be trying to digest this one as I read it out. How do you make your brand stand out in this current time and stick out with buying back customers from a time of mistrust and uncertainty? I currently work for the airline industry, but it seems the brand messages seem to be swamped by the same messages from competitors and similar messages. Also, the current values and missions hasn't aligned in the media and communication to what the brand guidelines state. Okay, that's a tricky one, especially being in the airline business currently. So how do you make your brand stand out in this current time and stick out? Again, it goes back to knowing why you're different and just really sticking to that, knowing what your tone of voice is and responding to the current climate that's in a way that is in line and respectful of your target audience and your customers. What I would say is a lot of brands, bigger brands, have halted their marketing budget. And I would think that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. Staying quiet is not the right response. Saying something is important. Not insulting is also important. But I think now more than ever is an important time to invest in your communications and in your marketing so that you're remembered for something after this time passes. If you want to also be there for your customers and be there for your target audience. So find out what would help them, do some research, do some testing. What are they feeling? What are they doing at the minute? And look at how you can help them. How important is it to building a brand in a startup at a very early stage, idea stage, or should we wait until later? I think I already answered, I think I already actually answered that question. How do you recommend staying consistent to a brand when a business is going through a pivot change? As I mentioned with the brand story, it's something that should consistently stay right from inception through to growth and scale. So that story shouldn't change. However, the mission might change and as you pivot your services or your products. So I would recommend revisiting your initial vision, purpose, and mission and making sure that the decisions that are being made now still align to those and still help you achieve that vision. And perhaps you need to revisit that tone of voice pillar diagram that I shared earlier, and maybe it needs to be adjusted or tweaked slightly in line with the way you've pivoted, but I wouldn't recommend changing your core brand story because that's something that you can own and nobody else. There's a huge amount of questions coming in both the Q&A and the chat. Yes, as Audrey said, if we don't get some of your questions in, just pop them on our Twitter and we will answer them afterwards. I think I'm going to wrap up now. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. As I said, I'm Kelly from White Bear Studios. And we're actually having loads of future events. So join our Slack group. and we can post about those. So thanks a million. And this has been a really great session. I hope you guys have actually got as much out of it as I have. And I also don't know how to end the meeting, so.
I'm still here. That's my job.
There.
That's what I'm here for. Thank you so much, Kelly. This was incredible. I was playing along as well, guessing all the colors and types, which was so much fun. I think I nailed it.
Good. Do you think it was useful?
Yes. A huge thank you to everyone who's still kind of on this call for interacting through the chat and kind of submitting questions as well. As Audrey mentioned, just kind of pop them on Twitter. I'll also, if you want to send me the Slack link, I can put that in the follow-up email as well, which will be sent along with this recording. So it is being recorded and we will send that to you after the event as well. I hate the goodbyes. I never know how to wrap it up, but I'm just going to say thank you again. Thank you, White Bear Studios. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you for those who are still on the call. Look forward to seeing you at our next event and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye. Have a nice evening.